Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right, I love it. Thank you so much for taking a minute out for the program today. I appreciate it.
Of course, man. Yeah.
So let's begin our journey with this. 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing everything, changing our lives. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you live and do business today?
That's a really fun question. So I was already working from home a month before the pandemic hit. So I already had the office set up and like working from home because it was kind of a standardized. So working from home was fun. But what really got me through was daily catch-up calls with other entrepreneurs, other podcasters that I got to do. And that really helped me grow and really helped me see the whole thing from a different perspective. Now, I worked in person for a lot of the years, but then moving to working from home was something that I was already on the top of the back of my mind because I've been podcasting. And I'm like, hey, where do I podcast? Well, let's podcast from home. And if I can work from home one day out of the week, perfect. I could do this. And so when I got to work from home, I was like, what could be even better, right? It
Yeah.
was it was a perfect um, segue into building out my podcast and building on the different services that came forth after that as well.
The interesting thing about that time period was that podcasting just blew up. I don't know, how long have you been in podcasting?
I started my podcast back in 2018,
Okay.
April, so 8 years now.
Okay. And I mean, I started my jazz podcast back in 2011, and at that time it was just like it was the Wild West.
Hmm.
It had kind of just, Steve Jobs rolled it out on stage and everybody wanted to
Yeah.
know what podcasts meant, and then all of a
Yes.
sudden it started kind of taking hold. But by the
Yeah.
time the pandemic came around, it's in pop culture, it's in shows and movies, and it's a big deal, and it hasn't
Exactly.
slowed down. I mean, it
No,
seems like it's just gained more relevancy and momentum as time has gone on.
it definitely has. And what's cool is the number sits at 5 point some million total podcasts. But what's happening is people are starting podcasts and stopping podcasts. So there's a lot of podcasts that are kind of stagnant, but there is a new wave of podcasters that are doing the continuation of creating constant, new content on a weekly, daily kind of basis.
Mhm.
And that number is sitting around 300 to 400,000 podcasts worldwide. So when
Yeah.
people said, podcasting is too concentrated, it's because they haven't stepped out of the that podcasting world. But the funny thing is there's a lot less people creating content, from writing books to creating movies to creating TV shows to creating podcasts. There's a lot more people consuming that content. And yes, we say there's 8 billion people in the world, but the fact of the matter is only 4.5 billion people have access to all of the internet stuff that we talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So there's so much going on: author, designer, producer, filmmaker, podcaster. But if I put you in front of a bunch of 13-year-olds at career day and you had to synthesize what you do on a daily basis to make it make sense to their brains, how would you describe your day job?
I would tell them I follow my curiosity to the fullest. So if something makes me curious, I'm not just going to touch on it, read about it, and walk away. No, I'm going to go deep dive into what does it actually mean? Because just like we say, hey, the tip of the iceberg is only 2% or 3% of what the iceberg is made of. So I go deep down into figuring out, okay, what does this really mean? And I've done that for all of the things that I've gotten myself into computers when I was building computers many, many years ago, into podcasting, into filmmaking, photography, beekeeping, building Lego sets, building computers. Like you name it, I've gone deep into the underlying, hey, what does it really make it tick? So that's what I would say to somebody what I do. Now I call myself as a home studio architect, right? That's my title. But what that means is that I help see things from a perspective that most people would not. Meaning all of us have a one single view. So when we're setting up something, we're focusing on, hey, what do I see? All right, perfect. But as soon as you turn the camera on, the camera's seeing the stuff that you don't even pay attention to.
Yeah, yeah.
So I help. refocus on, hey, what is actually working? What's actually makes sense? This is where you should be looking at.
So when you were a kid, what was your first big dream of what you wanted to do with your life?
Dude, I wanted to be a an airplane pilot, to be able to fly the airplanes and go around places, and that was mainly because I was born in Karachi, grew up in Saudi Arabia, then we visited the U.S. in the 80s, and so all up till we got a computer in our home, I wanted to be a pilot because I traveled, you know, done all these things. But as soon as the computer came in our home, it was a game over. It's a game changer. It's like, okay, this is what I want to learn how to do. And my dad was a computer consultant or and system analyst. So when I saw him flutter his keys on top of the keyboard, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? I don't understand. So that's what I wanted to be, and then it changed as my, we're all influenced by our parents, by our dads and my mothers and whatnot. So I took that and ran with it.
So who's been that inspirational force, that hero in your life that's allowed you to evolve and navigate to right now?
You know, um, so before it was my parents. Then I started when I moved out here, I was around other business owners. I was around people and I was just doing the work, which again inspired me going into computer design and computer and software design. But then it was 2003. I was on a work trip. It's 3 a.m., couldn't sleep, and I'm watching the info channel. And there's this guy running across the stage from left to right, full of enthusiasm. You probably know who I'm talking about. It's Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I get some of that? And like, well, if you dial this number, we'll send you these Power Talk CDs. So 2003, I signed myself up, got these Power Talk CDs. Personal Power is what he was talking, selling at that time. So I had these CDs, I had the cassettes, and I would listen to that. So that was something that, I was inspired by. And on top of that, having uncles around that were also building their businesses. One of my uncles was running a tent, event business where we would set up these customized tents. One of my uncles was buying and selling used cars, and trying out these few cars. Another uncle of mine, he's selling and inspiring people to buy religious content, like books and CDs and educational content for children. So I see around me uncles that are going down the path that makes them like they're solving problems, right? And I'm like, I want to solve problems. So that's what inspired me to keep going down that path. Now, didn't mean that that's the only thing that I was doing. I was also, having a full-time job like most people do.
So do you remember the first podcast you got hooked on that you just absolutely loved and had to consume?
Yes, it was Tim Ferriss's podcast.
Yeah.
The conversation that he had, and the one that I remember the most, and because it so resonated with me was the one he had with Gordon Joseph Levitt.
Yeah.
That was a powerful one, and in it, he talked about his story on how they wanted to record video content, and that's where he launched Record Now, or what's this company community that he created around recording videos and creating content and whatnot. And this is this is almost like 12, 13 years ago that
Yeah.
they launched this, right? So that was really inspiring. And as I'm listening to this, and of course reading books by Tim Ferriss and reading other books around the space, it's like, okay, there's something here. There's something that I was building inside of my head.
So I want to go back to that idea of seeing the computer for the first time because I remember when I got my first Packard Bell. I got to college and I'm like, I'm getting a new computer and I just couldn't
Hmm.
believe it. I had the encyclopedia on disc, like the whole thing blew my mind. I
Yeah.
came from an old brother word processor, but I'm curious after all of these years of seeing this meteoric rise in technology, both hardware and software. What is your favorite piece of software of all time? What's your favorite piece of hardware of all time?
My favorite piece of software at this point in time is, of course, all of the IDE tools that let you write code,
Yeah.
right? Visual Studio Code is so powerful. You can build on full-on applications. So that's my favorite piece of software from the productivity standpoint. My other favorite piece of software is a teleprompter app that lets me, do record video content. So Ecamm Live is a very powerful software that that. So that's my other favorite software. And from the hardware perspective, a teleprompter beats every single thing,
Wow.
no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you could have a dream guest on your podcast, anybody on the planet, spend some time with them, who'd you love to interview?
That's a powerful, powerful question. And there's so many people that come to mind from Seth Godin to Malcolm Gladwell and, Neil, not what's his name? Bill Nye, the science guy.
Yeah.
We've got Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yes.
And of course, I've had the pleasure to speaking with Pat Flynn on the podcast. I would really love to talk to someone like um, the guy who's running. See, it's funny. Stephen Bartlett
Yeah.
of Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
He'd be a really fun one to talk to because I love the way he questions and he puts those things together. And I really admire the guy because he shows his path. Like, he's been doing this since 2017 and when nobody was listening to this show. And he just continued to kept growing and growing and growing over the years. So those are some of the people that I would love to interview on my show and, go even deeper personal conversation.
So I want to set this next question up with a slight story. I remember I got a phone call a few years ago, and it was a young kid. He was a telemarketer, and he's trying to offer me all of this capital to build my company. And I was like, I'm a podcaster, and it seems like it's a little larger. It's not like a glass and brick and mortar. And we start talking, and he said, I've always wanted to do podcasting. And I said,
Mm,
well, why don't you do it? What are you doing? Well, I need to get this and I got to buy this and I got to buy that. I was like, no, 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 no. You need to have a good idea. And then you need to just have a computer. And then you
hmm
just need to go on Amazon and get a microphone and then start it and get an audience and then build up from there. So my question to you is this. There's always this as the home studio architect. There's always
mm.
this idea that everything's got to be this massive monolith. There's got to be everything perfect. But it's really about getting in there and getting the courage to get in front of that microphone and that camera and just starting it. And I remember I got off the phone with him and he was like, I was supposed to sell you on something and you ended up selling me on something. But it's that idea. So my question to
Yeah.
you is this. I talk to psychologists and therapists about like, what's the one thing? Get out of your own way. We're always hard on ourselves. What's the one thing when you look at people that are starting this venture of getting in front of a camera or microphone? What do people need to do?
You're absolutely right, Joe. We need to get out of our own way and take that first step. Whichever way it might look like for somebody, if it's you buying one microphone, just go buy the microphone. It's
Hmm?
$50, it's $100, it's $200. Just buy the thing if that's going to get you to take the action of actually recording an episode. When I started my podcast studio didn't look anything like this.
Yeah,
My first episode didn't even have a name for what the podcast was going to be called. And I recorded in my car on my phone.
yeah,
That was my first episode. My entire first season was recorded in my car because I
yeah,
couldn't find the time to do it at home,
yeah,
right? So I wanted to build that muscle, start ugly, and just get rolling because once you take that first step onto the journey of becoming a podcaster, of becoming a cyclist, a runner, like whatever it is, you're going to find what you need before even having to contemplate on stuff.
yeah. So you have a lot of energy. You're doing a lot of things. You're putting a lot out into the world. What gets you up every day when that alarm clock either goes off or doesn't go off? What gives you this energy to do a good job, take care of your soul, and to change lives with the work you're doing?
Well, what gets me up is I really believe that if you help others get what they want, you get what you want. And I love solving problems, and I love helping people get to a point where they feel comfortable in doing the work. So so that's what gets me up every single morning. And then the second thing that gets me up is showing my kids, the four kids that I have, that look, anything is possible if you put your mind to it. Literally anything. When I tell them I've done 700 conversations, they're like, wow, that's 700 hours of listening to somebody talk, of having that conversation. And it looks like a massive number, but if you spread it out, everything is possible.
Yeah.
So I asked my kids, what it is that you want to get to. If it looks too big, let's break it down even more. If that looks too big, let's break it down. Just break it down to one brick at a time. And there's a story in Will Smith's book, the first story, in front of his dad's shop, there was a wall that was crumbling. So they broke the whole down, and now they were going to rebuild it. And it was Will Smith and his brother's job to rebuild that wall. And there, every single day, he was like, "Oh my God, I got to build this whole thing." And his dad said, just stop. All you have to worry about is one brick. If you just put this one brick perfectly, that's it. Next day, come back, put another brick perfectly. Just focus on the one brick. Because if you do that, you won't even see the time go. And by the end of it, you're like, wow, we finished this entire wall. I think it was like a 20 foot, 25 foot wide, wall with like 8 foot height, whatnot, that they had to build out. So that was their job. That's what they got to do on their summer break. I think it took one summer or two summer, I can't remember.
So the one thing that I like to celebrate in this modern world we're living in of things just being between wars and immigration and things that are going on is celebrating those that came to this country, and so many of us did. The only real true Americans that I know are of blood of all kinds of different countries. That's the fabric of this country. Was it always a dream for you to come to America?
It wasn't. I didn't even know. Like I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and that's it's almost like asking a fish, "Hey, did you ever want to be in a bigger bowl?"
Yeah,
Like, I don't know,
yeah,
right? So
yeah.
that's what it was like for me. But because my mom's siblings had already settled in the U.S. Since the '60s, I already know that I had family to go to, right? Everybody was moving from, we still have some family in Pakistan, but going to college, I was like, I want to go to college in the U.S. and I already have family members here, so what better place to go? So it wasn't a big dream, but it was more like, hey, I want to be close to my family. I want to be close to my relatives.
So if you had a dream tonight, you ran into that young version of you before you came to America, and you walked into a room and there was a film projector and you clicked play on that projector and there was a 60-second highlight reel of this life you've lived, would that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
Probably not. It almost feels like a sci-fi movie. I'm like, wait, what you're able to do now? And and that's what technology is able to do. Like people would make fun of you if you could like 30, 40 years ago, if you could tell somebody, hey, it's gonna rain tomorrow or it's gonna rain 3 days later. Like, wait, are you a magician? But now you have that technology that you can kind of predict where things are gonna be. And so maybe he might believe, maybe he might not.
Yeah. So when it comes to AI, the best answer I've ever gotten about this technology is that it's an aggregate of all of our human um, behaviors or how we use AI. Most people use ChatGPT and AI to aid their own intelligence, to just make things a little better or
Yeah,
find something out like Google. What's your take on AI? Like, as we're living in, because we're at warp speed, we're in the middle of just absolute warp speed with
yeah.
technology. What's your take on it? How do you feel about it?
I absolutely embrace it. We've been using it for transcriptions, 7 years ago, and technology has come so far, and it is a way to supplement, not just supplement, but enhance your own thinking because you can ask questions of looking at a question from different perspectives. And AI is able to give you those different perspectives that you might not have even thought of because like there's four things like you know what you don't know, and you don't even know what other people know, and then there's a thing that you don't know and other people don't know. So it's able to give you those perspectives, and so I embraced it, and I use it, on a daily basis, and I use it from a perspective of organizing my own ideas and my own thoughts. And if there's a video that I watched and that really resonated with me, I'm like, hey, let's take that transcript, put it in there. What is it? How does it make sense? And how does it integrate with what I'm already doing? And how does it serve my audience, serve my people? How can I bring that perspective and infuse it with my flavor, infuse it with my uh, experience, and how can I then re-deliver it? Because there's so much content out there, and like Seth Godin says, everything that needed to be invented has already been invented. It's just
Yeah.
a matter of how are you going to put two, three, four things together in one place to make somebody else's life easy.
So when you look back on the big rearview mirror of your career and life, you think about everything that you've done and evolved to, what are you ultimately the happiest about, the proudest of?
The last 4 months is what I've been really most proud of because I've been able to take my 25 years of experience in software development and then the 8 years into podcasting and put those two things together to create something brand new. Because as a UX UI designer, software engineer, and like most workers, I was working on building somebody else's dream a reality.
Yeah.
And we've all been there. We've
Yeah.
all have held those positions where we're making somebody else's dream a reality. It might not feel like it, but we technically are. And that's what causes burnout actually when you're working on somebody else's project. So for the last 4 months, I've been able to make my dream a reality, and it's been the best thing that I ever got to do in all my life.
So let's dig a little deeper. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, fans, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm somebody that's is very caution about who I present to be. I guess I don't know, but my perception is I'm somebody that's gonna go after a thought that I have and go deep into it to figure out, hey, how does these things work? And sometimes I might not figure it out. And sometimes I have to put it in the back burner. And other times, like, okay, this is the focus thing that I need to focus on. Let's make that a reality. So that's somebody, it's almost like, who are you, Junaid? Well, I'm somebody that likes to solve problems and help others along the way raise up their expectations as well.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in the annals of human history and see one event with your own eyes, or you could go into the future, where would you choose to go? What would you love to see?
I know that I know where the future, well, I don't know where the future is, but we all want to travel back in time, right? So
Yeah.
if I were to travel back in time, I would probably go to the time of the prophet. Like, hey, what actually happened? How are people like what stories are getting deleted and
Yeah.
what stories are being, you know, um, promoted? Because we do
Yes.
know, like, history is written by the victor,
Uh-huh.
right? So what about Carthage? What happened to Carthage? What happened to those people? In modern day Tunisia. What happened to Persia? What happened to, the other countries that no longer around? Because there's been a ton of technology that's evolved over the years that we don't no longer know about because it didn't serve the purpose of the current people in charge. So that's what I would want to
That's
go.
That's fascinating. That almost makes me think about seeing an extinct animal before they leave the planet, you know.
Hmm.
Um, so if anybody wants to dive into the Horn of Plenty of everything that you're doing, where's the best place for people to go?
So you can find me on all social media platforms at Super Junaid if you want to learn about what I'm building right now, the dream come true piece that I was talking about. You can head on over to podglue.com. It's a operating system for podcasters. I've got a book coming out talking about how this whole thing works and where podcasting really lives.
I love it. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for taking a minute. It's been absolutely illuminating.
Thank
Best
you,
of
Tim.
luck with all the ventures and the dream.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.